program notes for the Florida Orchestra's Huff Family Foundation Masterworks series. I'm Andy Tefelsky, social media manager of the Florida Orchestra, classically trained percussionist and the host of this podcast. In this episode, I will be talking about Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's Ballade for Orchestra, Edvard Grieg's Piano Concerto in A minor, and Johannes Brahms' Symphony No. 2 in D major, so you can dive deeper into the music, anytime, anywhere. These audio program notes are authored by Kurt Loft, a local writer who has written about the arts in the Tampa Bay area for more than 40 years. You can find his full transcriptions at floridaorchestra.org. Let's dive in. Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, 1875 to 1912. Ballade for Orchestra, Opus 33. Performance duration approximately 13 minutes. Samuel Coleridge-Taylor will always be remembered as a better composer than businessman. After finishing his soon-to-be famous cantata Hiawatha's Wedding Feast in 1898, he sold the publishing rights for a one-time fee. The score was a hit and sold more than 200,000 copies, and while it made him famous, the royalties went elsewhere. The frustrated artist traded a life of relative ease for an exhausting workload that many believe led to his death from pneumonia at age 37. Quote, "If I had retained my rights in the Hiawatha music," he once lamented, "I should have been a rich man." End quote. Coleridge-Taylor was born in Croydon, England, the child of a black doctor from Sierra Leone and a white Englishwoman who named her son after the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge. His musical gifts were apparent at age 5 when he was given a violin and began singing in the choir of the local Presbyterian church. At 15, he enrolled in London's Royal College of Music, one of its first black students, putting aside the fiddle to focus on composition. Of his more than 100 works, a handful are considered highly original: the Petite Suite, the African Dances, the Clarinet Quintet, and the warmly lyrical Violin Concerto. Edward Elgar called him, quote, "the cleverest fellow" among the young composers in England at the time. And his teacher, Charles Villiers Stanford, praised his assured technique and stylistic panache. The Ballade for Orchestra was commissioned in 1896 by the Three Choirs Festival, and the premiere took place 2 years later. This is music full of youthful vigor. The composer was 23. Compact, urgent, and dramatic, and the thematic development mature and confident. After its energetic opening, the music shifts into a lyrical mode that evolves into a lengthy aria for orchestra. Soon, percolating woodwinds announce a new theme and direction, a vigorous variation on the middle section that ends abruptly. The composer Sir Arthur Sullivan happened to be in the audience at the premiere and noted that he was, quote, "much impressed by the lad's genius. He is a composer, not a music maker. The music is fresh and original. He has melody and harmony in abundance, and his scoring is brilliant and full of color, luscious, rich, and sensual." End quote. Edvard Grieg, 1843 to 1907. Piano Concerto in A minor, Opus 16. Performance duration approximately 30 minutes. Norway's best-known composer, Edvard Grieg, was a shy, inward-looking man inspired by the calm of the country, away from the bustle and noise of his native Bergen. He found solace in summer trips to a cottage near Copenhagen, where he enjoyed fruitful days and nights of composing. The country also suited his delicate health. Grieg suffered from a pulmonary condition that eventually would kill him. Although he wrote a youthful symphony, the concert suites, Holberg and Peer Gynt, which opens with the ethereal morning mood, he was less comfortable with large forms, preferring the intimacy of his more than 60 lyric pieces for piano, as well as other miniaturist creations. The least characteristic of all Grieg's work is, ironically, one of the most popular in the classical canon, the Piano Concerto in A minor. Unlike his small pieces, the concerto announces itself with gusto, the opening rumble of timpani sending the piano on a flourish of unforgettable melodies. This fragrant and impassioned work is among the most performed and recorded of any music in the repertoire. The kernel came from hearing Schumann's Piano Concerto in A minor in a performance by Clara Schumann at a concert in Leipzig. In fact, the opening of both the works seems to be cast from the same mold, and certainly the same key. Shortly after, Grieg met the great pianist Franz Liszt, who was impressed with the younger composer's first violin sonata. Grieg shared the handwritten manuscript of his Piano Concerto, which Liszt played by sight and offered advice on orchestration. Grieg accepted his counsel and continued to dabble with it, from its inception in 1868 until the year of his death. He revised the work no less than 8 times. The concerto opens with a salvo, a timpani roll, followed by a series of descending octaves by the piano. From there, Grieg condenses his material into a neatly packed development section with not one wasted note. Near the end, the soloist takes over with a luxurious cadenza. The adagio requires an unerring delicacy from the soloist, free of showmanship, and when done well, this movement mirrors an elegy by Mozart. Grieg was at heart a poet, and in this movement he turns lyric, plaintive lines into aural teardrops. The finale unfolds aggressively with a fast-paced Norwegian dance known as halling, bolstered by trumpets, trombones, and timpani that recall the dance in a triumphant close. By the way, this was the first piano concerto ever recorded in 1909 with pianist Wilhelm Backhaus, although the abridged version lasted only 6 minutes. Johannes Brahms, 1833 to 1897, Symphony No. 2 in D major, Opus 73, performance duration approximately 43 minutes. Brahms made good use of his fireplace. It was there that many an unfinished or disenchanted score met its fate, never to be shared with an adoring public. It would be an understatement to say Brahms was a self-critical artist. Second-rate music had no place in his world, and little if any of it can be found in his masterful chamber pieces, symphonies, overtures, concertos, sonatas, songs, and choral works. He labored for 15 years over his first symphony, possibly daunted by expectations of him as the heir to Beethoven. Quote, "You have no idea what it's like for a composer to always hear such a giant marching behind him," Brahms once growled. But the Symphony No. 2 enjoyed an easier birth, and continues little of the angst of its C minor predecessor. Similar in mood to Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, the D major symphony is buoyant, idyllic, and conveys a flowing warmth that culminates in a dazzling brass fanfare. Oddly, Brahms described it as, quote, "so melancholy that you will not be able to bear it. I've never written anything so sad," end quote. How can something so radiant be so sad? Such is the ambiguity of Brahms, where deeper meaning can be found just below the surface. TFO music director Michael Francis says, while the work is full of pathos and profundity, it wraps up with an astonishingly brilliant ending. Brahms composed the symphony in the summer of 1877 in the Austrian lakeside town of Pörtschach, where he swam in the mornings and hiked in the afternoons. Feeling fresh and creative, he knocked out the symphony in 4 months, saying that, quote, "the melodies fly so thick here that you have to be careful not to step on one." All 4 movements are in major keys, D, B, G, and D, respectively, supported by relaxed tempos that create a en plein air quality. The symphony softly develops its main theme in different instrument guises, and at one point quotes the melody of his famous lullaby. The adagio is the longest Brahms ever wrote, and among his loveliest creations, ushered in by cellos and bassoons. A tune by the oboe rising out of plucked cellos opens the 3rd movement, and the orchestra soon whips up a Slavonic-like dance. A hushed intensity in the strings sets the finale in motion, offset by a tranquil slowdown that soon gives way to the most spirited climax Brahms ever wrote, a blaze of brass that keeps us firmly in the home key of D major. This season, we wanted to give you a few key things to listen for in each Masterworks program. Here's what to keep an ear out for in this program. In Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's Ballade for Orchestra, the composer frames a soaring love song with 2 highly energized outer movements, giving the work a strong sense of balance and contrast. With its sweeping lyricism in Edvard Grieg's Piano Concerto in A minor, it's easy to miss that Grieg injected subtle dissonances into the concerto, adding a bittersweet, melancholy quality to the whole. Johannes Brahms wraps up this sunny, relaxed Symphony No. 2 with an explosion of brass, one of the most exciting endings in music. Thank you for listening to Sound Waves with the Florida Orchestra. Enjoy the concert.